Commander Zara Vex stood on the bridge of her warship, looking at the stars and thinking about war. She had been a soldier for 300 years and had fought in 12 different star systems. Her people called her the Iron Commander because she never lost a battle. War was simple to her and her kind. You found your enemy, and you destroyed them with better weapons and more ships. That was how civilized people fought wars. The message came through the communication system like all emergency calls. A human colony called New Cascadia was under attack by the Grim Horde. Zara knew about the Grim, and they were not pleasant creatures. They were tall and covered in black scales with claws that could tear through metal. They had red eyes that glowed in the dark, and they made sounds like screaming when they attacked. The worst thing about the Grim was that they never left anyone alive. Every world they attacked became a dead world with nothing but bones and ashes left behind. Zara looked at her crew and gave orders to set course for New Cascadia. She expected to find another dead colony when they arrived. The Grim had never taken more than 3 days to destroy any settlement. Human colonies were new and small and had almost no weapons to defend themselves. Most humans had only been in space for about 50 years, and they were still learning how to survive on other worlds. The journey to New Cascadia took 5 days. During those 5 days, Zara read every report about the Grim attacks and about human settlements. Humans were strange creatures who seemed to care more about growing food and building homes than building armies. They had small weapons and no real warships. Their colonies were built around farms and schools and hospitals instead of military bases. Zara could not understand how such soft creatures had managed to spread to so many worlds. When the warship arrived at New Cascadia, Zara expected to see a burning planet covered in smoke and death. Instead, she saw something impossible. The planet was still alive, and there were still energy readings from the human settlement. Ships were still flying around the planet, and there were signs of active fighting. The colony had been under attack for 14 days, and it was still fighting. Zara called her weapons officer over to check the sensors. The readings showed thousands of Grim warriors on the planet's surface, but they also showed human life signs. Many human life signs. The battle was still going on, and somehow the humans were not losing. This had never happened before in any war against the Grim. A message came through the communication system, and a human voice spoke to them. The voice was calm and steady, like someone asking about the weather. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the New Cascadia Defense Force calling Coalition warship. We have been expecting you. We could use some help down here, but we are not planning to leave our home." Zara stared at the communication screen. She had heard fear in the voices of many warriors before they died, but this human sounded like he was inviting friends to dinner. Either these humans were completely insane, or they knew something about fighting that she did not understand. She opened a channel back to the planet. "This is Commander Zara Vex of the Coalition Navy. We are here to evacuate any survivors and provide medical assistance. What is your current situation down there?" The human laughed, and it was not the laugh of someone who was about to die. "Well, Commander, we have been having quite a time with our Grim visitors. They seem to think they own the place, but we have been showing them different. We have lost some good people, but we are still here and we are still fighting. If you want to help us win this thing, we would be happy to have you join the party." Zara looked around her bridge at her crew. Her weapons officer was staring at the sensors like they were broken. Her communications officer was checking the equipment to make sure the messages were real. Her tactical officer was running scans of the planet's surface and shaking his head at what he was seeing. "Captain Morrison," Zara said, "our records show that no colony has ever survived a Grim attack for more than 72 hours. You have been fighting for 14 days. How is this possible?" There was a pause, and then the human spoke again. "I guess nobody told us it was impossible, Commander. We just decided we were not going to let these things take our home. Simple as that. Now, are you coming down here to help us finish this fight, or are you just going to sit up there and watch?" Zara had fought in wars across the galaxy, but she had never heard anything like this. These humans were talking about fighting the Grimm like it was just another job that needed to be done. They were not begging for rescue or crying about their losses. They were asking for help to win a war that could not be won. She gave orders to prepare landing shuttles and combat teams. Whatever was happening on New Cascadia, she was going to see it for herself. These humans had already done something impossible, and she wanted to understand how they had done it. Zara landed her shuttle on the edge of New Cascadia and stepped out into a world at war. The air smelled of smoke and burned metal and something else she could not identify. Explosions echoed in the distance, and she could hear the screaming sounds that grim warriors made when they attacked. But she could also hear something else, and it took her a moment to realize what it was. She could hear humans singing. Captain Jake Morrison met her at the landing pad, and he was not what she expected. He was tall and thin, with gray hair and lines around his eyes that spoke of too little sleep and too much worry. But his hands were steady, and his voice was calm when he spoke. "Welcome to New Cascadia, Commander. Sorry about the noise, but we have been having quite a party with our uninvited guests." Zara looked around at what had once been a peaceful farming colony. The neat rows of crops were now covered with defensive barriers made from farming equipment and metal sheets. Every building had been turned into a fortress, with gun ports cut into the walls and sandbags piled around the entrances. What shocked her most was that she could see families moving between the buildings carrying supplies and weapons like this was normal life. "How many people do you have left?" Zara asked as they walked toward what looked like the main command center. "About 8,000, Jake replied. "We started with 12,000, but we have lost some good people. The thing is, every person we have lost has made us stronger somehow. We learn from every mistake, and we get better at staying alive." They passed a group of children who were running messages between different parts of the settlement. The children looked serious but not afraid, and they moved with the careful steps of people who knew danger was always close. Zara had never seen children in a war zone who were not crying or hiding in terror. "You are using children as soldiers," she said, and there was anger in her voice. Jake stopped and looked at her with eyes that had seen too much death. "Commander, those children are fighting for their home and their families. They know the risks, and they choose to help because they know that if we lose, everyone dies. We do not send children to fight the Grimm directly, but we need every person to do their part if we want to survive." They reached the command center, and Zara saw something that made no sense. The walls were covered with maps and charts, but they were not military maps. They were farming charts and mining surveys and school diagrams. In the center of the room was a large table with a model of the colony made from clay and plastic pieces. Around the table stood a group of people who looked like teachers and doctors and farmers. "This is our war council," Jake said. "Meet Lieutenant Colonel Amy Price, who used to run the agricultural department and now runs our mobile artillery units. That is Dr. Lisa Chen, who was our chief medical officer and is now our expert on Grimm biology and weaknesses. Over there is Ben Clark, who taught school for 30 years and is now our best sniper. And that is Pastor Bill Hayes, who keeps our supply lines running and our spirits up." Zara stared at these people who were fighting a war against the most dangerous enemy in the galaxy. They looked like the kind of people who should be growing food and teaching children and healing the sick. They did not look like warriors, but something in their eyes told her they had become something more than they had been before. Amy Price looked up from the clay model and smiled at Zara. "Commander, we are glad you are here. We have been working on a new plan to deal with our Grimm problem, and we could use your ships to help us pull it off." "What kind of plan?" Zara asked. "The kind that should not work but probably will," Amy replied. "See, the Grimm think they are fighting farmers and teachers, and they keep expecting us to break and run. But we are not the same people we were 3 weeks ago. We have learned how to fight, and more importantly, We have learned how to think like soldiers while still thinking like humans. Ben Clark looked up from a scope he was cleaning. The thing about the Grimm is they are used to fighting people who fight like them. They expect big battles with lots of shooting and screaming and charging around. But we fight different. We fight smart and we fight together, and we never give up even when we probably should. Dr. Chen added, "We have been studying the Grimm bodies we have recovered, and we found some interesting things about their biology. They are strong and fast, but they have some weaknesses that we can exploit. The problem is getting close enough to use those weaknesses without getting killed." Pastor Hayes spoke in a voice that was gentle but strong. "Commander, these creatures came here thinking they would find helpless farmers who would die quietly. Instead, they found a community of people who decided that some things are worth fighting for no matter what the cost. Our families are worth fighting for. Our homes are worth fighting for. Our future is worth fighting for." Zara felt something she had never felt before in a war zone. She felt hope. Not the desperate hope of people who were waiting to be rescued, but the confident hope of people who believed they could win. These humans had taken everything she knew about warfare and turned it upside down. "Show me your plan," she said. Amy Price smiled and pointed to the clay model. "It starts with letting the Grimm think they are winning and ends with them wishing." They had never heard of New Cascadia. "But first you need to understand something, Commander. We are not trying to destroy the Grimm army. We are trying to make them understand that attacking humans is a very bad idea." Zara spent the next day learning how humans fight wars, and everything she learned made her question what she thought she knew about warfare. These people had turned their entire colony into a weapon, but they had done it in ways that no military academy would ever teach. They used farming machines as mobile artillery platforms and mining equipment as armor for their vehicles. They had turned their school into a communications center and their hospital into a weapons factory. What disturbed Zara most was how efficient the humans were at killing. Her people fought with honor and followed rules of warfare that had been established for thousands of years. Humans seemed to think that rules were just suggestions that could be ignored when survival was at stake. They used weapons that were designed for farming and mining to kill Grimm warriors in ways that were brutal and effective. Amy Price showed her how they had converted the large machines used for harvesting crops into mobile weapons platforms. The machines were slow but heavily armored, and they carried weapons that could destroy a Grimm squad with one shot. "We call them our corn crushers," Amy explained with a smile that was not entirely pleasant. "The Grimm learned real quick not to attack our fields anymore." Ben Clark took her to his sniper position on top of what used to be the town water tower. From there she could see the entire battlefield, and she began to understand how the humans had held out for so long. Every building and every hill and every patch of ground had been turned into a defensive position. The Grimm could not move anywhere without being watched and shot at by humans who seemed to appear from nowhere and disappear just as quickly. "The trick is not to fight them where they want to fight," Ben explained as he adjusted his scope. "They want big battles with lots of noise and chaos. We give them small battles with careful planning and precise shooting. Every time they attack, we kill some of them and then we fade away before they can hurt us. After a while, they start to get frustrated and frustrated enemies make mistakes." Dr. Chen showed her the medical center, which had been expanded into a research facility where humans were studying everything they could learn about Grimm biology and behavior. They had dissected Grimm bodies and analyzed their weapons, and even studied their battle tactics. What they had learned was being used to create new weapons and new strategies. "The Grimm are stronger and faster than humans," Dr. Chen explained, "but they are not smarter. They fight the same way every time because it has always worked before, but we learn from every battle, and we adapt our tactics based on what we observe. They keep doing the same things while we keep getting better at stopping them." Pastor Hayes took her through the supply tunnels that ran under the entire colony. The tunnels had been dug by hand in just 2 weeks, using mining equipment and simple tools. They allowed humans to move supplies and people without being seen by the Grimm warriors on the surface. Children and elderly people used the tunnels, to stay safe while still helping with the war effort. This is what community looks like when it is fighting for its life, Pastor Hayes said as they walked through tunnels lit by small electric lights. Every person contributes what they can. The children run messages and carry supplies. The elderly make ammunition and prepare food. The adults fight and build and plan. Nobody is useless and nobody gives up. That night, Zara witnessed something that changed her understanding of human warfare forever. The Grimm launched what they called a death spiral attack, which was their most devastating assault. Thousands of Grimm warriors attacked from all directions at once while screaming their battle cries and firing their weapons. It was designed to break the spirit of defending forces through sheer terror and overwhelming numbers. Instead of breaking, the humans seemed to come alive with a deadly energy that Zara had never seen before. Every person in the colony, from teenagers to grandparents, took part in a coordinated defense that turned the Grimm attack into a trap. The humans let the Grimm warriors penetrate deep into the colony and then closed escape routes behind them. What should have been the end of New Cascadia became the beginning of the end for the Grimm. Zara watched from the command center as the humans executed a battle plan that used every building and every tunnel and every person in the colony. They fought with weapons they had made themselves using tactics they had invented, and they did it all while protecting their families and their homes. When the battle was over, more than half the Grimm army was dead or trapped, and the humans were all ready. Planning their next move, Jake Morrison found her standing in the rubble of what had been the town square. Bodies of Grimm warriors were scattered everywhere, but so were the bodies of humans who had died defending their home. "This is what it costs," he said quietly. "Every victory costs us people we cannot replace. But the alternative is losing everything we have built here." "How do you keep fighting when you know the cost?" Zara asked. "Because the cost of not fighting is higher," Jake replied. "If we give up, then everyone dies, and everything we have built dies with us. If we keep fighting, then some of us die, but some of us live, and our children have a future. The choice is really very simple when you think about it that way." Zara looked around at the humans who were already cleaning up the battlefield and caring for their wounded and preparing for the next attack. They moved with the steady determination of people who had found something worth dying for and had decided that they would rather live for it. She was beginning to understand that these humans fought wars not just to win battles, but to preserve something that was more important than victory itself. After the failed Grimm death spiral attack, Zara requested permission to study human military tactics more closely. She wanted to understand how these farmers and teachers had become warriors who could defeat an enemy that had conquered entire star systems. Jake Morrison agreed and assigned her to work with Sergeant First Class Maria Santos, who had become the colony's main strategic planner. Maria Santos was a small woman with dark hair and eyes that missed nothing. She had been a soldier on Earth before coming to New Cascadia to start a new life as a farmer. When the war started, she found herself teaching warfare to people who had never held weapons before. What impressed Zara most was how Maria could explain complex military concepts in simple words that everyone could understand. "The thing about warfare," Maria explained as they walked through the colony, "is that it is not really about weapons, or technology, or even numbers. It is about psychology and willpower and the ability to keep thinking clearly when everything is falling apart. Humans are good at those things because we have been practicing for thousands of years." She showed Zara how the humans had studied their enemy with the same careful attention they used to study crops and weather patterns. They had learned that Grimm warriors fought hardest when they believed victory was certain, but became confused and angry when faced with unexpected resistance. The humans used this knowledge to create situations where the Grimm would make mistakes. "We give them small victories that lead to bigger traps," Maria said as she pointed to a map covered with red and blue markers. "We let them capture buildings that we have rigged with explosives. We let them think they have broken our supply lines when we actually have backup systems they do not know about. We make them feel successful right up until the moment when they realize they have walked into a killing field. Zara watched as human children attended school in underground classrooms between air raids. The classes were different now and included lessons on first aid and emergency communications and how to recognize different types of grim warriors. But they were still learning mathematics and reading and science because the adults wanted them to have hope for a future beyond this war. Why? Do you risk keeping the schools open? Zara asked Maria. Because if we stop teaching our children, then we have already lost, Maria replied. The Grimm want to destroy not just our bodies, but our culture and our future. Every day that our children learn something new is a day that we prove the Grimm cannot break us. Education is another form of resistance. That evening, Zara attended what the humans called a community meeting, which was held in the main hall of the school. Every adult in the colony was there, along with teenagers who were old enough to fight. They discussed strategy and resource allocation and casualty reports, but they also talked about maintaining hope and supporting families who had lost members. Dr. Chen presented her latest research on Grimm biology and explained how they could use this knowledge to create more effective weapons. Amy Price reported on the status of their mobile artillery units and requested materials to build more armored vehicles from farm equipment. Ben Clark gave an update on Grimm movement patterns and identified weak points in their defensive lines. But what struck Zara most was how these discussions were conducted. Everyone had a voice, and everyone listened when others spoke. Decisions were made by consensus rather than by military command structure. Leaders emerged naturally based on knowledge and ability rather than rank or position. It was unlike any military organization Zara had ever seen. After the meeting, Pastor Hayes invited Zara to join him for a walk through the colony. They visited families who were grieving for lost members and checked on wounded defenders in the medical center. They stopped at workshops where people were making ammunition and building defensive barriers. Everywhere they went, people were working together with a sense of shared purpose that impressed Zara. How do you maintain morale when the situation seems hopeless, she asked. The situation only seems hopeless if you think survival is the only goal, Pastor Hayes replied. But we are not just trying to survive. We are trying to prove that communities like ours deserve to exist. We are fighting for the right to build homes and raise families and grow food in peace. That is worth fighting for, even if the odds are against us. They stopped at the memorial wall where the names of the dead were written in careful handwriting. There were already too many names, and Zara knew there would be more before this war was over. But next to each name, someone had written a few words about who that person had been and what they had contributed to the community. Even in death, these people were remembered not as casualties, but as individuals who had chosen to stand and fight. We do not ask people to die for abstract ideas, Pastor Hayes continued. We ask them to live for real things like their children and their neighbors and their dreams of what this place could become. When you are fighting for something you love, it is easier to find the courage to do what needs to be done. Later that night, Zara stood on the walls of the colony looking out at the grim positions in the distance. She could see their fires and hear their voices carrying on the night air. Tomorrow they would attack again and more people would die on both sides. But she was beginning to understand that this war was about more than just military victory. The humans were not just defending a piece of ground. They were defending an idea about how people should live together and what communities could accomplish when everyone contributed their best efforts. They were proving that ordinary people could become extraordinary when they had something important to protect. They were showing that courage was not the absence of fear, but the decision to act in spite of fear. Maria Santos joined her on the wall, and they stood together in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Maria spoke. Commander, do you understand now why we cannot retreat and why we will not surrender? I think I am beginning to, Zara replied. You are not just fighting the Grimm. You are fighting for the right to exist as human beings rather than as victims. Everything changed when the Grimm brought their planet-killer weapon to New Cascadia. Zara watched from her ship as the massive orbital cannon moved into position above the colony. The weapon was designed to crack the planet's surface and make the world uninhabitable for any form of life. It was the ultimate expression of Grimm warfare, and it meant that negotiation or retreat was no longer possible. Zara called an emergency meeting with Jake Morrison and the Human Leadership Council. She expected them to finally accept the reality of their situation and agree to evacuation. Instead, she found them studying technical diagrams of the orbital weapon and discussing something that sounded completely insane. They were planning to capture the planet killer. "You cannot be serious," Zara said as she looked at their plans. "That weapon is protected by the entire Grimm fleet, and it is staffed by thousands of their best warriors. It would be suicide to attempt an assault on it." Jake Morrison looked at her with the same calm expression he had worn since the day she arrived. "Commander, we have been doing impossible things for 3 weeks now. We figured we might as well try one more impossible thing before we let these creatures destroy our home." Amy Price spread out technical drawings on the table that showed detailed schematics of Grimm ships and weapons systems. "We have been studying the wreckage of every Grimm vessel that has crashed on our planet. We know how their technology works, and more importantly, we know how to break it. The problem is getting close enough to their ships to do the damage we need to do." Maria Santos pointed to a tactical display that showed the positions of Grimm vessels around the planet killer. "We cannot win a traditional space battle because we do not have enough ships or weapons, but we do not need to win a space battle. We need to turn this into the kind of close-quarters fighting where human advantages become decisive." Dr. Chen explained how they had learned to exploit weaknesses in Grimm biology and psychology. Grimm warriors are used to fighting in the open, where they can use their strength and speed. They do not fight well in confined spaces where humans can use superior tactics and teamwork. If we can get inside their ships, we can turn their strength against them. The plan they showed Zara was unlike anything in any military manual she had ever read. They would use civilian spacecraft converted into boarding vessels to assault the Grimm fleet. They would not try to destroy the enemy ships, but would instead capture them by overwhelming their crews in hand-to-hand combat. The ultimate goal was to reach the planet-killer weapon and turn it against the Grimm fleet itself. "This is not warfare," Zara protested. "This is organized suicide with extra steps. You are talking about sending farmers and teachers and shopkeepers to fight trained Grimm warriors in space combat." "No," said Ben Clark quietly. "We are talking about sending human beings to fight creatures who do not understand what human beings are capable of when they have no choice but to win or die. There is a difference." Navy pilot Kate Thompson had volunteered to lead the assault squadron even though she had never flown in combat before coming to New Cascadia. She was a cargo pilot who had transported supplies between human colonies, but the war had turned her into something else entirely. "Commander, we have been training for this mission for a week. We know the risks, and we accept them. The alternative is watching our home get destroyed from orbit while we do nothing." Tony Rodriguez was a former Marine who had come to New Cascadia to work in the mines. Now he was organizing teams of civilians into boarding parties that would assault Grimm warships using weapons and tactics they had developed during the siege. "The thing about humans is that we learn fast and we adapt to whatever situation we find ourselves in. These Grimm have never fought humans in space combat. They are about to get an education." Zara realized that these people were not asking for her permission or her approval. They were going to attempt this mission regardless of what she thought about their chances of success. The only question was whether she and her crew would help them or watch them die alone. She looked around the room at faces that showed determination mixed with fear, but no trace of doubt about what needed to be done. "If we do this," she said slowly, "we need to coordinate our attack perfectly. One mistake and everyone dies, including the people still on the planet." Jake Morrison smiled for the first time since she had met him. Commander, we have been making this up as we go along for 3 weeks. We are pretty good at coordinating attacks by now. The question is whether you and your people are ready to fight like humans instead of fighting like everyone else in the galaxy. The assault began 6 hours later with a coordinated strike that violated every principle of space warfare that Zara had learned in 3 centuries of military service. Human civilian ships converted into assault vessels launched themselves directly at Grim warships while coalition forces provided covering fire. Instead of trying to destroy enemy vessels, the humans crashed into them and boarded them like pirates from ancient Earth history. Zara watched on her tactical display as impossible things began to happen. Human boarding parties overwhelmed Grim, defenders who were not prepared for the ferocity and creativity of human close combat tactics. Civilian miners and farmers fought trained alien warriors in the corridors of warships using improvised weapons and tactics that no military academy had ever taught. Kate Thompson led her squadron of converted cargo ships in a desperate assault on the planet killer itself. They did not try to destroy the massive weapon, but instead landed on its hull and began cutting their way inside using mining equipment and welding torches. What followed was a running battle through 18 decks of the most heavily defended weapon in the Grim arsenal. The final assault was led by Jake Morrison himself, along with volunteers from every part of New Cascadia society. They fought their way to the main control room of the planet killer using weapons they had built in their workshops and tactics they had learned during the siege of their colony. When they reached the weapons control systems, they did not try to destroy it. Instead, they turned it on the Grim fleet. 3 days after the Grim fleet was destroyed, Zara walked through New Cascadia and tried to understand what she had witnessed. The colony was in ruins, with half the buildings damaged or destroyed, and scorch marks on every surface that told the story of desperate fighting. But it was still a colony and not a graveyard. Families were already working to rebuild homes and plant new crops and plan for a future that had seemed impossible just a week before. She found Jake Morrison in what remained of the town square helping to clear rubble from the memorial wall. His hands were bandaged, and he moved carefully because of injuries he had received during the assault on the planet killer. But his eyes held the same calm determination that had impressed her from the first day they met. He looked up when he saw her approaching and set down the broken concrete he had been carrying. "So, Commander, what do you think?" he asked, with a tired smile. "Ready to add some human tactics to your military training programs?" Zara considered her response carefully. In less than a month, she had watched a small group of farmers and teachers and shopkeepers hold off an enemy that had conquered entire star systems. She had seen them adapt to warfare with a speed and creativity that defied everything she thought she knew about military science. Most importantly, she had learned that humans did not just fight wars, but redefined what warfare could accomplish. "I thought I knew war," she admitted as they walked toward the rebuilt command center. "I thought it was about superior technology and larger armies and better tactics. But you have shown me that war is really about something else entirely. It is about the refusal to accept defeat even when defeat seems inevitable." They stopped at the new memorial wall, where the names of all the dead had been carefully inscribed in metal that would not fade or break. There were too many names, but next to each one, someone had written words about who that person had been and what they had contributed to their community. Even in death, these people were remembered not as casualties, but as individuals who had chosen to fight for something they believed was worth protecting. "The thing about humans," Jake said quietly, "is that we are not the strongest species in the galaxy, and we are not the smartest, and we certainly do not have the best technology. But we have something that seems to be pretty rare out there among the stars. We have the ability to decide that some things are more important than our own survival." Dr. Chen joined them, carrying a data pad filled with her latest research reports. She had been working non-stop to document everything they had learned about Grim biology and tactics so that other human colonies would be better prepared if they faced similar attacks. Her face showed exhaustion, but also satisfaction at work that might save lives on worlds she would never visit. "Commander, we have prepared a complete tactical analysis of everything we learned during this conflict," she said as she handed Zara the datapad. "We hope this information will be useful to the Coalition forces and to other human settlements that might face similar threats in the future." Amy Price approached carrying blueprints for new defensive systems that could be built using civilian equipment and local materials. She had been designing fortifications that could turn any human settlement into a fortress capable of withstanding attacks by superior forces. Her plans were based on lessons learned during the siege, and they showed how ordinary people could become extraordinary defenders when they had proper preparation and training. "We are not planning to wait for the next attack," Amy explained. "Every human colony needs to be ready to defend itself, because we cannot count on rescue arriving in time. But we also cannot live in constant fear. So we need defenses that allow normal life to continue even during times of danger." Pastor Hayes walked over from the rebuilt school where classes had resumed for the children of New Cascadia. The curriculum now included emergency procedures and basic military training, but it also included art and music and literature, because the adults wanted their children to understand that there was more to human civilization than just warfare. Education remained an act of defiance against those who would destroy human communities. "The children are asking when you will visit their classroom, Commander," Pastor Hayes said with a gentle smile. "They want to thank you for helping save their home, and they want to show you the pictures they drew of the battle. Some of those pictures are quite remarkable, and I think you would enjoy seeing how children understand what happened here." Tony Rodriguez came over carrying reports from the teams that were salvaging useful technology from the wrecked Grim ships. The humans were not just rebuilding their colony, but improving it using lessons learned from their enemies. They were turning weapons of destruction into tools for construction and transforming instruments of war into devices that could serve peaceful purposes. "We are learning that every challenge contains opportunities if you know how to look for them," Tony explained. "The Grim brought us advanced technology that we can adapt for our own uses. Their weapons can be converted into mining equipment, and their ship components can be used to build better power systems and communication networks." As evening approached, Zara found herself standing once again on the walls of the colony, looking out at landscape that had been transformed by war. The fields were scarred, and many of the trees had been destroyed, but new growth was already beginning to appear. Humans were working to repair the damage while also preparing for whatever challenges might come in the future. Jake Morrison joined her as the sun set over New Cascadia, painting the sky in colors that reminded her of the fires that had burned during the battle. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, watching people move through their damaged but living community with the steady determination of those who had found something worth defending and had discovered they were capable of defending it. "I am going to recommend that the Coalition offer immediate alliance agreements to all human colonies," Zara said finally. "Your people have demonstrated tactical innovations that could change how we think about warfare. More importantly, you have shown that ordinary citizens can become extraordinary defenders when they have proper motivation and leadership." Jake nodded slowly. "That sounds like a good idea, Commander. But remember that humans are not interested in conquering anyone or imposing our will on other species. We just want to be left alone to build our communities and raise our families in peace. If others will respect that, then we can be the best allies they could ask for. But if they try to destroy what we have built, then they will discover what happens when humans decide to fight back." Zara submitted her final report to Coalition headquarters 3 days later. The humans of New Cascadia had accomplished something that military experts had declared impossible, and they had done it using methods that challenged every assumption about modern warfare. They had proven that victory was not always determined by superior technology or larger armies, but sometimes by superior determination and willingness to adapt to changing circumstances. Her recommendation was simple and direct. The galaxy contained many species who were stronger and smarter and more advanced than humans, but none who were more stubborn or more creative when their survival was threatened. Humanity would either become the coalition's greatest ally or its most dangerous enemy, and the choice of which outcome occurred was entirely up to the coalition itself.